Some secrets aren't meant to stay buried. And when they surface, they don't just reveal the past. They rewrite the future. Let me tell you about Grace Morrison and Alexandra Bennett, her cousin's wife, the woman Grace ran from 10 years ago without looking back. Grace returned to Charleston after her grandmother's funeral, expecting nothing but paperwork and memories. Instead, she found a will that shocked everyone. The historic family house wouldn't go to the family. It would go to Grace and Alex, but only if they accepted one impossible condition. In the attic, hidden inside an old wooden chest, Grace discovered letters. 50 years of forbidden love between her grandmother and a woman named Margaret. A love they buried to survive. And the final letter explained everything, including why the grandmother chose Grace and Alex for this inheritance. Because what happened between them that summer night wasn't a mistake. It was the truth they both destroyed themselves trying to forget. And now, from beyond the grave, Grace's grandmother was offering them what she never had, a second chance. This isn't just a story about inheritance. It's about hidden love, impossible choices, and the courage it takes to live an honest life. Stay with me until the end to hear this story. See you soon. Grace felt the scent of magnolias before she saw the house. 10 years hadn't changed anything on East Bay Street, except now the wisteria vines grew wild over the wrought iron fence, as if trying to hide something. She stopped the Uber 3 houses away. She didn't want to arrive. Not yet. "This good, ma'am?" the driver asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Grace nodded without speaking. She paid, grabbed her small suitcase, and stood frozen on the sidewalk. Her grandmother's house rose at the end of the block, with its white Charleston single-style architecture and the oak door that always creaked. She had sworn never to return. She had built an entire life in Charlotte to avoid having to return. But the dead have a cruel way of making you keep promises you never made. When she started walking, her legs didn't feel like her own. Each step brought her closer not just to an inheritance, but to something she had buried so deep she'd almost managed to forget it. Almost. The gate was ajar. Someone had already arrived. She pushed the door open and the creak was exactly as she remembered. The front porch was the same. Clay pots with dying geraniums, the dry fountain in the center, the historic Charleston brick pavement cracked by time. But there was something different. A presence. A silence too tense to be just the emptiness of an abandoned house. "You came." The voice came from the side hallway. Grace turned slowly, as if doing it quickly might break something inside her. Alex was leaning against the doorframe leading to the parlor. She wore a white linen blouse and dark jeans, her black hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She was 32, same as Grace, but something in her eyes made her look older, or more tired, or both. Grace didn't respond. She couldn't. Because seeing Alex after a decade wasn't like remembering someone. It was like feeling something again that you'd killed on purpose. "I didn't think you'd come," Alex said, and there was something broken in her voice, something that hadn't been there before. "I thought you'd send a lawyer." "I'm here for the paperwork," Grace replied, and her voice sounded colder than she intended. "Nothing more." Alex smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile you use when you no longer have words left to pretend something doesn't hurt. "Of course, the paperwork." They stared at each other in silence. The air between them was charged with something heavy, something neither wanted to name. Grace dropped her suitcase by the door and walked toward the back garden, needing distance between them. But Alex followed. "The others will arrive in an hour," Alex said from behind. "The attorney is coming at 5. Your mom already confirmed. Your Uncle Ernest, too." "And your husband?" Grace asked without turning, and the word husband came out with an edge she hadn't expected. Alex took a while to respond. Brandon is in Atlanta. He decided it wasn't necessary to come. Grace stopped in front of the dry fountain. That's where it had been. Right there, 10 years ago, on a June night, Alex had kissed her for the first time. And Grace had responded. And then everything had fallen apart. Why did you really come back, Grace? That question, that nickname. Nobody called her Grace anymore. Everyone used her full name now. Nobody except Alex. Grace turned slowly and faced those dark eyes she knew better than her own. Because my grandmother died, and I have a right to be here. I didn't ask why you have the right. I asked why you came back. There was a long, uncomfortable silence, full of things neither could say. Grace felt her throat closing. Alex took a step forward, then another, until they were less than 3 feet apart. I didn't want to be here either, Alex whispered. But I had no choice. Brandon insisted I come, said it was my duty as family. But the truth is... She stopped, as if the words were too dangerous to release. The truth is that when I found out you were coming, I couldn't sleep for 3 days. Grace felt the air grow heavier. Her heart was beating too fast. She wanted to walk away. She wanted to run. But she couldn't move. Alex, don't. Don't what, Grace? Don't tell the truth. Don't admit that this... She gestured at the space between them. Never went away. Grace closed her eyes, breathed deeply. When she opened them, Alex was closer. 10 years ago, I made a decision, Grace said, her voice trembling. And I left. And you got married. And we moved on with our lives. Moved on? Alex repeated with a bitter laugh. Is that what you think? That I moved on? Before Grace could respond, they heard voices at the entrance. Alex stepped back immediately, as if burned. She composed herself, smoothed her blouse, and walked toward the front door without looking back. Grace stood by the dry fountain, heart pounding against her ribs, and the certainty that this day was going to destroy everything she'd built to keep herself safe. Subscribe now. YouTube prioritizes subscribers, and those who aren't subscribed miss future stories. The family began arriving in waves. First was Linda, Grace's mother, in her formal black dress and too strong perfume. She hugged her daughter coldly, as if fulfilling a social protocol rather than a gesture of affection. You look tired, Linda said, examining her with critical eyes. Still working night shifts at that hospital? Yes, Mom. You should take better care of yourself. You're not 20 anymore. Grace didn't respond. She never did. Her mother had the gift of turning any conversation into a list of flaws. Then came Uncle Ernest, her late grandmother's brother, a heavy-set 60-year-old man in a suit that fit too tight and a fake smile that fooled no one. His wife, Aunt Barbara, accompanied him, a thin woman with pursed lips who looked at everything with suspicion, as if the house might steal something from her. Grace, sweetheart, it's been so long, Ernest said with a voice too cheerful for a funeral. I'm so sorry about your grandmother. She was a wonderful woman. Thank you, Uncle. Well, at least she left us this beautiful house, Ernest continued, looking around with greedy eyes. They say property in Charleston's historic district is through the roof. This place must be worth a fortune. Linda shot him a withering look. Ernest, she died 2 weeks ago. Could you show some decency? I'm just stating facts, Linda. We're all here for the same reason. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, because Ernest was right. Everyone was there for the inheritance. No one wanted to admit it, but it was the truth. Alex appeared from the kitchen with a tray of coffee and cookies. She moved through the house as if it were still hers, with a familiarity that hurt Grace more than expected. Alex had kept coming. Grace had fled. "The attorney will be here in 15 minutes, Alex announced, pouring coffee into the porcelain cups that had belonged to the grandmother. "I made something to eat if anyone's hungry." "Thank you, dear," Barbara said, taking a cup. "Always so thoughtful. Not like others who disappear for years." The jab was directed at Grace. She knew it. Everyone knew it. But she didn't respond. She just held Barbara's gaze until the woman looked away. They all sat in the parlor, a large space with antique dark wood furniture, olive green velvet curtains, and a worn Persian rug in the center. Photographs hung on the walls in black and white. The grandmother when she was young, the grandfather who had died before Grace was born, aunts and uncles who no longer visited. Grace avoided looking at the photograph she knew was on the back shelf. The photo of her and Alex when they were 22, at her grandmother's birthday party, arms around each other and smiling, before everything got complicated. At exactly 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Alex went to open it and returned with the attorney, an older man with gray hair and thick glasses, carrying a leather briefcase. "Good afternoon, everyone," the attorney greeted formally. "I'm sorry for your loss." Mrs. Eleanor was an exceptional woman. He sat facing the family, opened his briefcase, and pulled out several documents. "Well, we'll proceed with the reading of the will. As you know, Mrs. Eleanor Morrison left very clear instructions about the distribution of her assets. The main property, this house, along with the adjacent land, will be..." He stopped, frowned. He pulled out a white envelope from the bottom of the briefcase and looked at it with confusion. "This is strange," he murmured. "There's an attached note that wasn't in the preliminary version of the will." "What note?" Ernest asked, leaning forward. "What does it say?" The attorney carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, handwritten in the grandmother's shaky handwriting. The attorney read it silently, and his expression changed. He went pale. This changes everything." "What do you mean it changes everything?" Linda demanded, her voice tense. The attorney looked at Grace. Then he looked at Alex, and something in his gaze made Grace's stomach drop. "Mrs. Eleanor left specific instructions," the attorney said slowly. "The house will not be divided among the legal heirs. It will be granted only to 2 people under one condition." "What condition?" Barbara asked shrilly. "What are you talking about?" The attorney took a deep breath. "The house will be inherited by Grace Morrison and Alexandra Bennett, if both accept to fulfill Mrs. Eleanor's final wish." The silence that followed was absolute. Grace felt the world stop. Alex dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor with a crash that echoed through the entire room. "What?" Linda whispered, standing up. "That doesn't make sense. Alex isn't even direct family. She's my nephew's wife," Ernest completed, with barely contained rage. "She has no right to anything." Mrs. Eleanor was very clear, the attorney insisted, holding up the note. "It's written here in her own hand. The house is for Grace and Alex. They'll know why. And if they have the courage to accept the truth, they'll also know what to do with it." Grace felt like she couldn't breathe. She looked at Alex. Alex was staring at her, eyes enormous, filled with terror and something else. Something Grace didn't want to recognize. "This is ridiculous," Linda said, snatching the note from the attorney. "My mother wasn't in her right mind. She was sick. This can't be legal." "It's completely legal," the attorney responded firmly. "Mrs. Eleanor wrote it 3 months ago, when she was still lucid. It's dated, signed, and notarized. It's valid. Ernest stood up, his face red with fury. I won't allow this. That house is worth millions. You can't just give it to two. Two. To what, Uncle? Grace asked quietly, standing up too. Finish the sentence. Ernest clenched his fists but said nothing. Barbara grabbed his arm, pulling him back. This won't stand, Linda said, her voice icy. I'm going to challenge it. I'm going to hire the best lawyer in the city and prove my mother wasn't capable of making this decision. You can try, the attorney said, putting away the documents. But the note is clear, and the law is on their side. If Miss Grace and Miss Alex accept the condition, the house is theirs. What condition? Alex asked for the first time, her voice trembling. What do we have to do? The attorney pulled out another envelope, smaller, also in the grandmother's handwriting. This is for you two. You must read it together alone. Once you have 48 hours to decide whether to accept or not. He handed the envelope to Grace. Their fingers touched, and Grace felt an electric shock run up her arm. If you decide not to accept, the attorney continued, the house will be sold, and the money will be donated to a charity foundation. None of the family members will receive anything. Ernest exploded. This is an insult to the entire family. It's Mrs. Eleanor's will, the attorney repeated, closing his briefcase. And it's final. He stood up, said goodbye politely, and left the house, leaving behind a dense and dangerous silence. Linda looked at Grace with eyes full of rage. What did you do? What? What did you tell your grandmother to make her do this? What kind of manipulation did you use? I didn't. Grace shook her head. I haven't spoken to her in 10 years. I have no idea why she did this. Liar! Linda spat. You were always a liar. She turned and left the house, dragging her purse violently. Ernest and Barbara followed, throwing looks full of venom. And then it was just the two of them, Grace and Alex, standing in the middle of the parlor, with the white envelope between them like a bomb about to explode. What's happening, Grace? Alex whispered. Grace looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Alex. I don't know, but I think my grandmother knew something she never should have known. Alex went pale. No, it can't be. Grace opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet, written in her grandmother's handwriting. She read aloud, slowly, feeling each word break something inside her chest. Dear Grace and Alex, I know what happened 10 years ago. I know why you left, Grace, and I know why you stayed, Alex. I know what you said to each other by the fountain. I know what you felt, and I know what you sacrificed. This house is for you because love shouldn't have to hide, because family shouldn't force you to choose between being happy or being accepted. But there's something else you need to know. Something I also hid for too long. In the attic, inside the wooden box with the initials EM, you'll find letters. Letters I wrote 50 years ago to someone I loved and could never have. Letters that explain why I understand what you're feeling. Read the letters, and then decide. If you choose to keep the house, you must promise me something. Don't repeat my mistakes. Don't hide. Don't let fear steal what could be your only chance to be completely happy. And if you don't have the courage to do it, then this house isn't for you. Because a house without love is just a tomb. With all my love and regret, Grandma Eleanor. When Grace finished reading, her hands were shaking so much the sheet fell to the floor. Alex was crying silently, her hands covering her mouth. She knew, Alex whispered. All this time she knew. Grace felt tears burning her eyes. 10 years running, 10 years building walls, and her grandmother had known everything. and she hadn't judged her. She had understood her. Alex took a step toward her, then another. This time Grace didn't step back. "What are we going to do, Grace?" Grace looked at those dark eyes, those eyes she'd tried to forget for a decade without success. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think we need to go up to the attic. If this doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does." The staircase leading to the attic creaked under their feet as if protesting years of neglect. Grace went first, holding a flashlight she'd found in the kitchen. Alex followed closely, so close she could feel her breath on the back of her neck. The attic was exactly as Grace remembered it. A spacious, dusty space, full of old boxes, furniture covered with white sheets, and the smell of old wood mixed with stagnant time. Afternoon light came through a small round window, creating elongated shadows on the floor. "Do you see any box with initials?" Alex asked, looking around. Grace moved the flashlight across the space. There were dozens of boxes, some of worn cardboard, others wooden. But in the back, leaning against the wall, there was a different box. It was dark polished wood, with brass fittings, and on the lid, elegantly engraved, were the initials E.M. "There," Grace pointed. They approached together. The box was closed with a small antique lock, but when Alex touched it, it opened easily. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, were bundles of letters, dozens of them, all written in the same careful handwriting of the grandmother. Grace picked one at random and opened it. It was dated 1973. "My dearest Margaret, today I saw you again at the market and had to pretend I felt nothing. Had to smile at your husband, ask about his work, while you looked at the ground and I died inside. How much longer can we go on like this? How much longer can I pretend I don't love you?" Grace stopped reading. She looked at Alex. Alex had picked up another letter, and her eyes scanned the words with an expression of shock. "Margaret," Alex whispered. Margaret was her best friend, Mom's godmother, the one who died in the 80s. "Not just her best friend," Grace said quietly. "She loved her." They kept reading, letter after letter. The story unfolded before them like an open wound. Eleanor and Margaret had met in the 60s, when both were young. They had fallen in love in secret, but Margaret had yielded to family pressure and married a man she didn't love. Eleanor had done the same, marrying Grace's grandfather, and for years they had seen each other in secret, writing letters they could never send, loving each other in the margins of lives that didn't belong to them. In a letter from 1978, Eleanor wrote, "Today, Margaret told me we can't see each other anymore. Her husband is starting to suspect. I told her I understood, but I lied. I don't understand anything. I don't understand how the world can be so cruel. I don't understand why loving someone can be considered a sin. I'm going to live with this pain for the rest of my life. And when I die, no one will know who I really was. No one will know that the only time I was completely happy was in her arms." Grace felt tears rolling down her cheeks. Alex was crying too, with silent sobs shaking her shoulders. "That's why she left us the house," Alex said, her voice breaking, "because she doesn't want us to make the same mistake she did." Grace closed her eyes. She felt the weight of 50 years of secrets, of hidden love, of lives lived halfway. "Alex," she began, but didn't know how to finish the sentence. Alex turned to her. Her eyes were red, but there was something else in them. Determination, anger, pain. "Why did you leave, Grace?" she asked, and her voice sounded like glass about to shatter. "Why did you leave me?" Grace felt all the air leave her lungs. "Because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Of everything," Grace admitted, and the word came out like a choked scream. Scared of my family. Scared of what they'd say. Scared of losing everything. Scared of what I felt for you. Alex took a step toward her. And you think I wasn't scared? You think it was easy for me to stay? You think it was easy to marry Brandon knowing I didn't love him? Then why did you do it? Because you left, Alex shouted, and the shout echoed through the entire attic. Because you kissed me that night, told me you loved me, and the next day you disappeared. You moved to Charlotte without saying goodbye. No explanations. And I stayed here, broken, waiting for you to come back. But you never came back. You never came back. Grace felt her heart break in two. I thought it was the right thing, she whispered. I thought if I went away, everything would be easier. That you could move on. That I could forget you. And did you? Did you forget me? Silence. A long, painful silence, full of truths that couldn't keep hiding. No, Grace admitted, and the word came out like a confession. Not a single day. Alex closed her eyes. The tears kept falling, but now there was something different in her expression. Something that looked like relief and agony at the same time. Me neither, she whispered. Not a single damn day. They looked at each other in the attic's half-light, surrounded by old letters and secrets that had waited 50 years to come to light. What are we going to do, Grace? Grace looked at the scattered letters around them, looked at the wooden box with her grandmother's initials, looked at Alex, the woman she'd secretly loved for 10 years, the woman who had married someone else because Grace hadn't had the courage to stay. I don't know, she said finally, but I think my grandmother is right. We can't repeat her mistakes. I'm married, Grace, Alex said, and the word married sounded like a death sentence. I have a life. I have obligations. Do you love him? The question hung in the air. Alex took a long time to respond. No, she finally admitted. I never loved him. I married him because I was devastated. Because I needed to prove to everyone I was okay. Because I needed to prove to myself I could move on without you. But I couldn't. I never could. Grace felt something inside her break and rebuild at the same time. Then what are we doing? Surviving, Alex replied bitterly. Just like your grandmother. Just like Margaret. Surviving in lives that don't belong to us. Grace moved closer. This time she was the one who took the steps. This time she was the one who closed the distance. She stopped in front of Alex, so close she could see the freckles on her nose, the fine lines around her eyes, the way her lips trembled. I don't want to survive, Grace whispered. Not anymore. Alex looked at her with huge, vulnerable eyes. What do you want then? Grace raised a hand slowly and touched Alex's face. Her fingers brushed her cheek, drying a tear. I want to live. I want to stop hiding. I want this. And before she could regret it, before fear could stop her, she leaned in and kissed Alex. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if both were testing whether this was real or just another cruel dream. But then Alex responded, and the kiss deepened, became desperate, full of 10 years of contained longing, of unspoken words, of nights spent imagining this very thing. When they pulled apart, both were trembling. We can't do this, Alex whispered, but didn't move away. It's too complicated. There's too much at stake. I know, Grace replied. But we also can't not do it. Not after this. Not after knowing my grandmother spent 50 years regretting not having the courage. Alex closed her eyes, resting her forehead against Grace's. I'm scared. Me too. What if everything goes wrong? What if everything goes right? They stayed like that, embraced in the attic, surrounded by letters telling a story of hidden love, of lost opportunities, of courage that came too late. Downstairs, the parlor clock struck 7 in the evening. They had 48 hours to decide. 48 hours to choose between safety and truth, between what was comfortable and what was real. "I need time," Alex said finally, pulling away. "I need to think." "Okay. Will you stay here tonight?" Grace nodded. "Yes. I have nowhere else to go." Alex gathered some of the letters and carefully put them back in the box. "I'll stay too," she said. "I can't go home like this. Brandon will ask questions I can't answer." They came down from the attic in silence. The house seemed different now, as if the walls had absorbed the secrets that had just come to light. Alex went to the kitchen to prepare something for dinner. Grace sat on the parlor sofa, looking at the photograph of the two of them when they were 22. In that photo, they were happy, innocent. They didn't know what was coming. They didn't know that would be the last summer they could be themselves without consequences. Alex returned with 2 plates of soup and toasted bread. They ate in silence, but it was no longer an uncomfortable silence. It was a shared silence, full of unanswered questions and possibilities that were both frightening and hopeful. "What are you going to do about your mom?" Alex asked after a while. "She's furious." "My mom is always furious with me," Grace replied wearily, "for as long as I can remember. Nothing I do is enough for her." "Did she ever tell you anything about your grandmother? About Margaret?" "No, never." Grace set her plate aside. "But now I understand a lot of things. My grandmother was always different, freer, more understanding. My mom, on the other hand, she's always been rigid, critical, as if she were afraid the world would judge her." "Maybe," Alex suggested. "She has her own secrets too." Grace didn't respond. It was a possibility she hadn't considered. When they finished dinner, Alex suggested they sleep. There were 2 available rooms on the first floor, the one that had been the grandmother's and a guest room. Grace chose the guest room. Alex stayed in the grandmother's, but neither of them slept. Grace lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the old house, the creaking of wood, the wind moving the wisteria against the windows, the beating of her own heart that wouldn't calm down. At some point in the early morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside her door. Grace held her breath, waited. But the footsteps continued on, moving away, and Grace was left alone with her disappointment and relief mixed together. The next day, she woke to sunlight streaming through the window. It smelled like fresh coffee. She got up, put on a sweatshirt, and went out into the hallway. Alex was in the kitchen, making breakfast. She wore the same clothes from the day before, but had let her hair down. It fell over her shoulders in dark waves that Grace remembered caressing so many times in her dreams. "Good morning," Alex said without turning around. "Good morning." They sat down to breakfast at the small kitchen table. They ate sweet rolls with coffee, and the silence between them was dense, charged with everything they hadn't said. "Brandon called me last night," Alex said suddenly. "I told him I was going to stay here a few days to handle the inheritance matters." "What did he say?" "He got angry, said it was a waste of time, that I should let the lawyers handle it." Grace took a sip of coffee, tasting the bitterness on her tongue. "Are you going to tell him anything?" Alex took a while to respond. "I don't know. I don't know what to tell him. I don't even know what to think." She looked up and looked at Grace directly. "Do you know what you want?" Grace held that gaze. "Yes. I want you. I've always wanted you." Alex closed her eyes, as if those words physically hurt her. It's not that simple, Grace. I know, but it's not impossible either. I have a marriage. I have a reputation. My family, Brandon's family. Everyone knows me as the perfect wife, the respectable woman. If I get divorced, if this comes out, they'll destroy me. Or maybe, Grace said gently, you'll finally be free. Alex let out a bitter laugh. Freedom is a luxury not all of us can afford, Grace. You left for Charlotte. You built a life away from here, where nobody knows you, where nobody judges you. But I stayed. And here, in Charleston, everyone knows me. Everyone knows who I am. And if I change now, if I admit everything has been a lie, what will be left of me? Grace stood up and walked around the table. She knelt in front of Alex, taking her hands in hers. You'll have you, the real you, not the version you built to please everyone. And maybe it's terrifying. Maybe it hurts. But at least it'll be real. Alex looked at her with eyes full of tears. What if I'm not brave enough? Then, Grace replied, squeezing her hands, we'll be brave together. If any part of this story resembles your life, the hype button helps keep it from staying silent. They stayed like that, in the kitchen lit by morning light, with the world waiting outside and a deadline running relentlessly. 48 hours. Less than 2 days to decide between the past and the future, between the safety of lies and the danger of truth. And as the clock kept moving forward, they both knew the decision they made wouldn't just change their lives. It would change everything. Alex's phone rang at 11 in the morning. Brandon's name appeared on the screen like a warning. Alex looked at the phone with the same expression she'd have if she were looking at a snake. You have to answer, Grace said from the sofa, though her voice sounded tense. I know. Alex slid her finger across the screen and brought the phone to her ear. Hello? Where are you? Brandon's voice sounded irritated, impatient. I've been calling you since last night. I told you I was going to stay at Grace's grandmother's house for a few days. Yes, you told me, but you didn't tell me you were going to ignore my calls. Alex closed her eyes, took a deep breath. I didn't ignore them. I was busy. Busy doing what? It's just paperwork, Alex. I don't understand why you need to stay there. You can come back today and let the lawyers handle it. It's not that simple. Why not? Now Brandon's voice went up in volume. What's so important about that house? Alex looked at Grace. Grace was watching from the sofa, her expression tense, fists clenched on her knees. Brandon, I can't explain it over the phone. Then come home and explain it to me in person. I can't. Not yet. There was silence on the other end. A dangerous silence. What's going on, Alex? Nothing. I need time to sort this out. Time? Brandon let out a dry laugh without humor. You've been needing time for years. Time for this, time for that. There's always something you need to process, something you need to work through. I'm tired, Alex. The words hit like a blow. Alex felt her stomach tighten. Tired of what? Of this, of you, of this marriage that feels more like an obligation than a choice. Alex felt tears burning her eyes, not because it hurt to lose Brandon, but because he was right, and they both knew it. Brandon, I'm going to be honest with you, he interrupted, and his voice sounded more tired than angry. I know you don't love me. I've always known. Since the day we got married. But I thought with time, I thought maybe you could learn to love me. Or at least pretend better. Alex felt her breath catch in her throat. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be sorry. Just be honest. Is there someone else? The question hung in the air. Grace stood up, as if she wanted to intervene but stayed still, watching Alex with worried eyes. No, Alex lied. There's no one else. Then what is it? What's keeping you there? Alex closed her eyes, felt the weight of 10 years of lies on her shoulders. The truth. Brandon was silent for a moment. What truth? The truth about me, about who I really am. I don't understand. I know, and I can't explain it now. But when I come back, we need to talk. Are you asking me for a divorce? Alex opened her eyes, looked at Grace. Grace was staring at her with an expression of terror and hope mixed together. I'm asking you to give me these 2 days, and then we'll see. Brandon let out a bitter laugh. Fine, take your 2 days. But when you come back, Alex, I expect answers. Real answers. No more evasions. No more secrets. Understood? Understood. Goodbye. He hung up without waiting for a response. Alex stood holding the phone, trembling. Grace rushed over, taking her by the shoulders. Are you okay? Alex shook her head. No, I'm not okay. She dropped the phone on the couch. I just lied to him. I told him there wasn't anyone else. Technically, you didn't lie, Grace said gently. There isn't someone else. It's always been me. Alex looked at her with eyes full of tears. Does that make it better or worse? Grace didn't know what to answer. The rest of the day passed in tense silence. Alex locked herself in the grandmother's room, needing space. Grace respected that distance, though every passing minute weighed on her like a stone in her chest. At 3 p.m, the doorbell rang. Grace opened the door and found Linda, her mother, standing on the threshold with an expression of barely contained fury. We need to talk, Linda said without preamble, entering without waiting for an invitation. Hi, Mom. Good to see you, Grace replied sarcastically. Linda ignored her. She walked straight to the parlor and sat on the sofa with her back straight, hands crossed over her purse. Where's Alex? Upstairs. Why? Because I need to talk to both of you. Grace went upstairs and gently knocked on the bedroom door. Alex, my mom is here. She wants to talk to us. The door opened. Alex's eyes were red, but she had composed herself. They went downstairs together. Linda looked at them with a hard expression, evaluating them as if they were witnesses in a trial. I assume you've already read my mother's note, Linda said bluntly. Yes, Grace replied. And the letters in the attic? Grace froze. How do you know about the letters? Linda let out a bitter laugh. Because I read them too. 30 years ago, when I was a teenager. I found them by accident, looking for old clothes for a school project. Her face hardened. And when I asked my mother about them, she told me they were things from the past, that they didn't mean anything, that I should never mention them. But they meant everything, Alex said quietly. Linda glared at her. And you think that's an excuse? You think because my mother had those feelings, that justifies what you two are doing? Grace stood up. We're not doing anything. Don't lie to me, Grace. I know what happened 10 years ago. I know why you left. Your grandmother told me before she died. She told me she'd seen something between you two. Something inappropriate. The silence that followed was absolute. Grace felt the world stop. You knew? She whispered. All this time you knew? Of course I knew, Linda replied coldly. Do you think I'm stupid? I saw how you looked at yourself in the mirror every time Alex came to the house. I saw how you got nervous. I saw how you left without explanations, running away like a coward. The words were like stabs. Grace felt tears burning her eyes. If you knew, why didn't you ever say anything? Because I hoped it would pass. That you'd grow up. That you'd realize it was just confusion. Linda stood up, approaching her daughter. But I see I was wrong. I see you're still the same confused girl who left 10 years ago. I'm not confused, Mom, Grace said, her voice shaking with rage. I never was. I know exactly what I feel. And what I feel is love. Real. True. It doesn't matter if you don't like it. It doesn't matter if you don't approve. It's what I feel. Linda looked at her as if she'd been slapped. And what about the family? What about your reputation? What about everything I've built so you could have a respectable life? A respectable life? Grace repeated bitterly. Or a life you'd approve of? Because they're not the same thing, Mom. They've never been the same thing. Linda pressed her lips together. She turned to Alex, who had remained silent all this time. And you're married. What do you think will happen when Brandon finds out? When his family finds out? They'll destroy you. I know, Alex replied, her voice trembling. But maybe it's time to stop living in fear of being destroyed. Linda let out a dry laugh. How romantic. How brave. But bravery doesn't pay the bills. Bravery doesn't protect you when the world turns its back on you. And believe me, the world will turn its back. Then let it, Grace said, taking Alex's hand. But I'm not going to keep living a lie to please people who will never accept me anyway. Linda looked at them with an expression of contempt. You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your lives. Or maybe, Alex replied, we're finally making the right decision. The one your mother never could make. Linda went pale. She gripped her purse so hard her knuckles turned white. If you accept that inheritance, if you decide to keep this house, I'll do everything in my power to challenge it. I'll drag you through the courts. I'll expose you to the whole family. And when I'm done, you'll have nothing left. Then do it, Grace said calmly. But you won't make us change our minds. Linda turned and walked toward the door. She stopped in the threshold, looking back with eyes full of rage and something else. Something that looked like pain. Your grandmother was a coward, she said quietly. Her whole life she was a coward. And now she's trying to redeem herself through you. But it won't work. Because the world doesn't forgive. The world never forgives. She left, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the entire house like a gunshot. Grace and Alex stood in the middle of the parlor, still holding hands, trembling. Are you okay? Alex asked. Grace shook her head. No, but I don't care either. She looked at Alex directly. I'm not going to let her decide for me. Not again. Alex squeezed her hand. What if she's right? What if the world turns its back on us? Then at least we'll be together. Comment if you think they made the right decision. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and purple. Grace and Alex sat in the back garden, in the same place where everything had started 10 years ago. The fountain was still dry, but now the wisteria had grown so much it covered almost the entire wall, creating a shelter of purple flowers. Do you remember the first time we kissed? Alex asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Grace smiled weakly, as if I could forget. It was here, in this exact place. Alex looked around, as if she could see ghosts from the past. It was night. There was a party inside the house. You came out to get some air, and I followed you. You were drunk, Grace remembered. Not as much as I pretended. Alex looked at her. I needed courage. I'd spent months wanting to kiss you, months dying to touch you. But I was scared. Of what? Of everything. That you'd reject me. That I'd scare you. That you'd never see me that way. Grace turned to her, taking her face in her hands. I'd been seeing you that way since I was 19. Since the first time you came to dinner with Brandon and sat across from me and smiled. And I thought, I'm lost. Alex let out a broken laugh, with tears in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were my cousin's girlfriend. Because you were out of my reach. Because I thought it was better to die in silence than risk losing you completely. But you lost me anyway. I know. They looked at each other in the dying light of sunset. Alex raised a hand and placed it over Grace's, pressing gently. If we could go back, if we had another chance, would you do it differently? Grace didn't have to think about the answer. Yes, I would have stayed. I would have fought. I would have been brave. And now, Alex whispered, can you be brave now? Grace leaned in and kissed her. This time it wasn't tentative. This time it was sure, firm, full of decision. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Yes, Grace replied. I can be brave now. They spent the night talking. They talked about everything they hadn't said in 10 years. About the jobs they'd had, the relationships they'd tried and failed, the nights they'd thought about calling, but hadn't had the courage. They talked until their throats hurt and their eyes burned with exhaustion. And when dawn began to creep through the windows, they fell asleep on the parlor sofa, embraced, exhausted, but together. Grace woke to the sound of the doorbell. Alex was still asleep against her shoulder, breathing softly. Grace moved carefully not to wake her and walked to the door. It was Uncle Ernest. But he wasn't alone. A man in a gray suit with a briefcase accompanied him. Good morning, Grace, Ernest said with a fake smile. Sorry to come so early. This is Attorney Ramirez. He's my lawyer. Grace felt her stomach drop. What's going on? We need to talk about the will, the lawyer said professionally. May we come in? Grace didn't want to let them in, but she knew she had no choice. She stepped aside. They entered. Alex woke to the noise and quickly stood up, smoothing her wrinkled clothes. What are you doing here? Alex asked, her voice sleepy. We've come to resolve this matter, Ernest replied, sitting down without invitation. Attorney Ramirez has been reviewing the will, and we have some interesting findings. The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. Ladies, I've reviewed Mrs. Eleanor Morrison's will, and while it's true that the attached note is valid, there are certain inconsistencies that could be challenged in court. What inconsistencies? Grace asked suspiciously. The note mentions that the house will be granted to you two if you fulfill a condition. But it doesn't clearly specify what that condition is. It says you must read the letters and decide. Decide what? It's ambiguous, and ambiguity is fertile ground for a challenge. The condition is clear, Alex said, crossing her arms. We have to be honest. We have to not hide. And what does that mean legally? The lawyer asked condescendingly. How do you measure honesty? How do you verify it? It's subjective, unenforceable. Ernest leaned forward. Look, let's be reasonable. This house is worth a lot of money. A lot. And you two? Well, you don't have the means to maintain it. Property taxes alone are a fortune. Maintenance is expensive. What are you going to do? Sell it eventually anyway? That's none of your business, Grace replied coldly. It's the whole family's business, Ernest shot back, raising his voice. This house is part of the family heritage. It can't just be handed over like that to two. To two. To what, Uncle? Grace interrupted, standing up. Say what you really want to say. Ernest clenched his jaw. I won't allow this house to fall into the hands of two people who are committing a sin. The silence that followed was icy. Get out of here, Grace said quietly but firmly. Now. This isn't your house yet, Ernest replied. Until you sign the documents and accept the condition, it's still state property. Then sign the damn documents, Alex said suddenly, looking at Grace. Accept it. Accept the inheritance. Accept everything. Grace looked at her with huge eyes. Alex. Do it, Grace. Because if we don't, they win. And your grandmother died trying to give us this opportunity. We can't waste it. Ernest stood up, looking panicked. Wait. You don't have to make a decision now. You can think about it. You can. No, Grace interrupted, looking at the lawyer. Where are the documents? Miss, I recommend you think carefully. Where are the documents? Grace repeated, her voice steel. The lawyer, nervous, searched in his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. Here, you both need to sign. And you need to do it in front of a notary. Then call one. Grace, don't be impulsive, Ernest said, his voice desperate. Think about your family. Think about your reputation. Think about... I'm thinking about myself, Grace interrupted. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking about myself. She turned to Alex. Are you sure about this? Alex nodded, tears in her eyes, but her expression determined. More sure than anything else in my life. The lawyer made a call. At 11 in the morning, a different notary arrived, a young man who seemed confused by the whole situation, but did his job professionally. He read the complete will, including the grandmother's note. He explained the terms, and then he handed them the documents. Grace signed first. Her hand trembled so much the signature barely looked like hers. Then Alex signed. And with that second stroke of ink, everything changed. The notary sealed the documents. Congratulations, he said. You're officially the new owners. Ernest stood up violently, knocking his chair to the floor. This won't stand. I'm going to challenge it. I'm going to take this to court. I'm going to... Do what you want, Grace said calmly. But this house isn't yours anymore. It never was. Ernest and the lawyer left furiously, slamming the door. The notary said goodbye awkwardly, and also left. And then, for the first time in days, Grace and Alex were completely alone. We did it, Alex whispered, looking at the signed documents on the table. We really did it. Grace took her hands. Yes, we did. But the celebration was short-lived, because at 2 p.m, Alex's phone started ringing non-stop. First Brandon, then her mother-in-law, then her sister-in-law, then a cousin, then another. Messages came in waves, each one angrier than the last. Alex didn't answer any of them. She left the phone on the table and looked at it as if it were a bomb. They know, she said hollowly. Ernest must have told them. Now the whole family knows. What do they say? Grace asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Alex picked up the phone and opened the messages. She read aloud, her voice trembling. Is it true what Ernest says? Are you really going to leave Brandon for a woman? This is shameful. How could you do this to our family? Mom is devastated. She can't believe her daughter is. That. You should be ashamed. Alex dropped the phone. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. Not with silent sobs, but with heartbreaking crying, with moans that came from the depths of her chest. Grace hugged her, holding her as she broke. I'm sorry, Grace whispered against her hair. I'm so sorry. "It's not your fault," Alex replied between sobs. "It's mine. It's always been mine. I should have been honest from the beginning. I should have had the courage 10 years ago. And now it's too late." "It's not too late." "How can you say that?" Alex pulled away, looking at her with red, swollen eyes. "I just lost my family. I'm going to lose my husband. I'm going to lose everything. And for what? For a house? For a fantasy that might not even work?" The words hit Grace like punches. "Is that what you think this is? A fantasy?" "I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just know I'm terrified." Alex wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "What if your mom is right? What if the world turns its back on us? What if this between us isn't enough to make up for everything we're going to lose?" Grace felt something inside her break. "If you think that, then maybe we shouldn't have signed those papers." Alex looked at her with an expression of pain. "I'm not saying I don't want to be with you. I'm saying I'm scared. Is that so hard to understand?" "No, it's not hard." Grace stood up, needing distance. "But I can't force you to choose me if you're not sure. I can't ask you to sacrifice everything for something you don't even know if you want." "I do want," Alex said, standing up too. "Of course I want. But wanting something and being ready to face the consequences are two different things." They looked at each other from opposite sides of the room. The space between them seemed to grow with each second. "So what do we do?" Grace asked quietly. Alex didn't respond immediately. She looked at her phone, which kept ringing. Looked at the signed documents on the table. Looked at Grace with an expression of agony. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "But I need time. I need to process all this. I need space." The words were like ice. Grace nodded slowly, though she felt like her heart was being ripped out. "Okay, Grace. No, it's okay." Grace grabbed her jacket from the back of the sofa. "Take all the time you need. I'm going out for a while." "Where are you going?" "I don't know, anywhere. I just need air." She left the house without looking back. She walked through Charleston streets aimlessly, hands in her pockets, heart beating too fast and tears threatening to overflow. She had made the bravest decision of her life. She had signed those documents. She had chosen truth. But now, walking alone through streets full of happy tourists and couples in love, she wondered if bravery was enough. She wondered if love was enough. And she had no answer. She reached White Point Garden and sat on a bench. She watched people pass, families with children, couples holding hands, elderly people walking slowly. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were and where they were going. Grace had no idea. She pulled out her phone. She had 3 messages from her mother. She didn't open them. She had one from Alex. That one she did open. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. Come back, please." Grace closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and typed a response. "Give me an hour. I need to think." She stayed sitting on that bench for exactly 1 hour, watching, thinking, feeling. And when that hour ended, she stood up, because she had made a decision that would change everything. She returned to the house. She opened the door. Alex was standing in the middle of the parlor, red eyes, waiting. "Alex," Grace said firmly, "we need to talk, really. No fear, no lies. Because if we're going to do this, if we're going to choose this, then it has to be real, completely real." Alex nodded. "You're right." They sat facing each other, and for the first time in 10 years, they said everything. Every fear, every insecurity, every dream, every wound. And when they finished talking, when there were no words left, they looked at each other in silence. "Do you still want this?" Grace asked. Alex didn't hesitate. "Yes, even if I'm scared. Even if it's hard. Yes." "Then we'll do it together. Everything. The consequences, the fear, the judgment. Everything." Alex extended her hand. Grace took it, and in that moment, they sealed a pact. A pact that wasn't about a house or an inheritance. A pact about choosing each other, no matter what. Share if you believe in second chances. They spent 2 days locked in the house. 2 days without answering calls, without opening the door, without facing the outside world. They lived in a fragile bubble, knowing it could burst at any moment. The bubble burst on the 3rd day, when Brandon showed up without warning. Grace heard the sound of a car engine parking in front of the house. She looked out the window and saw a black BMW. Brandon got out of the vehicle with abrupt, furious movements. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair combed back and an impeccable suit that screamed money and power. "It's Brandon," Grace said, feeling panic grip her chest. Alex went pale. She stood up, nervously smoothing her hair. "I knew he'd come. It was just a matter of time." The doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then pounding on the door, hard, impatient. "Alex, I know you're in there. Open the damn door." Alex looked at Grace. Grace saw the fear in her eyes, but she also saw something else. Determination. "I can stay with you," Grace offered. "You don't have to face him alone." Alex shook her head. "No, this is something I have to do myself." She took a deep breath. "But don't leave. Please. Stay close." Grace nodded. Alex walked toward the door with slow steps, as if each one cost her superhuman effort. She opened it. Brandon stood in the doorway, his face red with fury. He smelled of whiskey and contained rage. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded, entering without permission. "I've been calling you for 3 days. 3 days, and you don't answer. Not once." "Brandon, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down," he shouted, and his voice echoed through the entire house. "Your family called me. My family called me. Everyone's telling me things about you. Things I can't believe. So I'm going to ask you once, and I want the truth. What the hell is going on?" Alex closed her eyes. When she opened them, there were tears, but also a clarity that hadn't been there before. "I'm going to divorce you," and the silence that followed was absolute. Brandon looked at her as if he hadn't understood the words. "What?" "I'm going to divorce you," Alex repeated, her voice firmer. "I should have done it years ago. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. But I was scared, and I hurt you, and I hurt myself. But I can't keep going like this." Brandon let out an incredulous laugh, without humor. "Because of her?" He pointed to where Grace stood, who had remained in the hallway. "You're going to leave me for a woman?" "I'm going to leave you because I never loved you," Alex replied, and the words came out with brutal honesty. "I'm going to leave you because our life together has been a lie. I'm going to leave you because you deserve to be with someone who truly loves you. And I deserve the same." Brandon took a step toward her, threatening. "You can't do this. We've been married for 7 years. 7 years. You can't just decide to leave." "Yes, I can. And I'm going to do it. And what about my family? What about my reputation? Do you have any idea of the scandal this is going to cause?" "I know. And I'm sorry, but I can't keep living to please your family. Or mine. I have to live for myself." Brandon clenched his fists. For a moment, Grace thought he was going to hit something. Or someone. She took a step forward, ready to intervene. But Brandon didn't hit. He just stood there, trembling with rage, with tears of humiliation in his eyes. "You know what the worst part is?" he said, his voice shaking. "That I knew. I always knew. I knew you didn't love me. I knew there was something else. But I thought if I gave you time, if I was patient, maybe someday." He wiped his tears roughly. "How stupid I was." "You're not stupid, Brandon," Alex said gently. You just deserve something better than this. Better than me. I don't want something better. I wanted you." He looked at her directly. "Is it her? Is it because of her you could never love me?" Alex looked at Grace. Grace held her gaze. "Yes," Alex admitted. "But it's not just because of her. It's because of me. Because my whole life I've been pretending to be someone I'm not, and I can't anymore." Brandon followed her gaze. He saw Grace. He looked at her with a mixture of hate and pain that made Grace feel nauseous. "I hope it's worth it," he said, his voice full of venom. "I hope when your whole family turns their back on you, when you lose everything, when you realize the mistake you made, I hope she's still there." "I will be," Grace said, stepping forward. "No matter what." Brandon let out a bitter laugh. Everyone says that, until it gets hard. He turned to Alex one last time. "You'll receive the divorce papers in a week. My lawyer will make sure you don't keep anything. Nothing. Understand? You'll leave this marriage with what you brought. Nothing." "I don't want anything of yours," Alex replied. "I just want my freedom." Brandon turned and left, slamming the door so hard the frames shook. When the sound of his car engine faded away, Alex collapsed. She literally let herself fall to the floor, legs folded, head in her hands, sobbing. Grace ran to her, kneeling beside her, wrapping her in her arms. "It's over. It's over." "I just destroyed my marriage," Alex cried. "I just destroyed 7 years of my life." "You didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken." Alex clung to her, crying against her shoulder. Grace held her, stroking her hair, whispering words of comfort she wasn't even sure Alex could hear. They stayed like that, on the entrance hall floor, until the tears ran out, and only silence remained. "What am I going to do now?" Alex finally whispered. "I don't have a job. I don't have my own money. All I have is this house. And you." "That's more than you had yesterday," Grace replied gently, "and we'll find a way, together." Alex raised her head, looking at her with red, swollen eyes. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I have to be. Because if I'm not, then all of this was in vain." Grace took her face in her hands. "We bet everything, Alex. Everything. Now we just have to keep moving forward." The following days were chaos. Alex received the divorce papers, just as Brandon had promised. They were brutal, calculated to take everything from her. But Alex signed them without reading the details. She didn't care anymore. Brandon's family launched a smear campaign. Rumors, gossip, lies mixed with truths. Social media exploded. Someone leaked the story to local media. Charleston heiress abandons husband for same-sex lover. The headlines were sensationalist, cruel. Grace had to take leave from the hospital in Charlotte. Her boss suggested, with uncomfortable delicacy, that maybe it would be better if she resigned. "Given the circumstances," he said. Grace understood the message. She resigned that same afternoon. Alex's mother appeared once, just once. She didn't enter the house. She stood on the street, looking up at the windows, with an expression of absolute pain. Alex saw her from upstairs. She almost went down, almost opened the door. But her mother turned and left before she could decide. Linda, Grace's mother, didn't come back. But she sent a message, a single message that said, "You're a disappointment." Grace read it, felt the dagger in her chest, and then blocked the number. But there were also surprises. One afternoon, while Grace was cleaning the attic, she heard the doorbell. Alex opened it. It was an older woman with white hair and simple clothes. Grace came downstairs to see who it was. "Miss Alex?" the woman said with a trembling voice. "I don't know if you remember me. I'm Martha. I worked for Mrs. Eleanor for 30 years. Alex smiled weakly. "Of course I remember you, Martha. How are you?" "Good, dear. Good." Martha looked inside the house with nostalgia. "I came because I found out what happened, and I wanted you to know something." "What?" Martha pulled an old envelope from her purse. "Mrs. Eleanor gave me this before she died. She told me to give it to you when you two finally decided, when you had the courage to choose each other." Alex took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, the grandmother's last letter. Grace and Alex read it together, with Martha waiting patiently. "My dear girls, if you're reading this, it means you made it. It means you were braver than me, than Margaret, than all the women who came before and had to hide who they were. I know the path will be difficult. I know there will be judgment, rejection, pain, but I also know true love is worth all those sacrifices. Martha has instructions to help you. There's money saved in a bank account in my name. Not much, but enough for you to start. Use it to fix the house, to find work, to live while you build your new life. Don't tell anyone in the family. It's just for you. And remember, family isn't always the people we share blood with. Sometimes it's the people we choose, the people who choose us back. Be happy. Please. Be happy for all of us who couldn't be. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor P.S. In the garden, under the dry fountain, there's a buried chest. Inside you'll find the letters Margaret wrote to me, the ones I could never answer because I was afraid. Read them and learn from my mistakes." When they finished reading, both were crying. Martha was too. "There's $100,000 in that account," Martha said softly. "Mrs. Eleanor saved it over the years. She made me promise I'd give it to you if you ever found your way back to each other." Grace and Alex looked at each other. $100,000 wasn't a fortune, but it was a start. It was a chance. "Thank you, Martha," Alex said, hugging the older woman. "Thank you for taking care of her, and for taking care of us." Martha said goodbye with tears and blessings. When she left, Grace and Alex went out to the garden. They dug under the dry fountain, and there, wrapped in plastic and waterproof cloth, was the chest. Inside were dozens of letters. Letters Margaret had written in secret. Letters full of love, longing, desperation. They read them all, one by one, sitting under the wisteria. And in the last letter, written days before Margaret died, they found these words: "My dear Eleanor, I'm dying. The doctors give me weeks, maybe days. And the only thing I regret is not having had the courage to live my truth with you. I'm going to leave these letters to my daughter. Someday when she's older, maybe she'll understand. Maybe she'll forgive her mother for living a lie. But if I could go back, if I had a second chance, I wouldn't be afraid. I'd choose you. I'd choose the scandal, the judgment, the loss. Because none of that matters if I'm not with you. Don't make my mistake, Eleanor. If you ever have the chance to choose love, choose it. Always. Yours. Forever, Margaret. Grace closed the letter with trembling hands. She knew, she whispered. Margaret knew my grandmother would keep these letters. She knew someday someone would find them. They weren't just letters, Alex said. They were a warning and a blessing. They looked at each other in the afternoon light, surrounded by words of love that had waited 50 years to be read. Do you regret it? Grace asked quietly. Alex didn't hesitate. No. Terrified, yes. Insecure, too. But regret? Never. Grace smiled. A small smile, but real. Then let's make it worth it. Let's make every sacrifice, every loss, every tear. Let's make it mean something. How? By living, really, without hiding, without apologizing. Alex extended her hand. Grace took it. And together, they walked back to the house that was now theirs. Their house, their refuge, their beginning. If this story touched your heart, leave a like. 6 months passed. 6 months of reconstruction. Not just of the house, but of themselves. They used the grandmother's money to fix the leaking roof, to paint the walls, to restore the garden fountain. Alex learned to do carpentry work watching YouTube tutorials. Grace found work at a community clinic in Charleston, earning less than half of what she earned in Charlotte, but feeling more useful than ever. They opened 2 rooms of the house as an Airbnb rental. Tourists came, fell in love with the place, left glowing reviews. The money wasn't much, but it was enough. More than enough. It allowed them to live with dignity. Not everything was easy. There were days when Alex cried for no apparent reason, overwhelmed by the weight of everything she'd lost. There were nights when Grace woke up with panic attacks, convinced they'd made a terrible mistake. But there were also moments of light, like the morning Martha showed up with a tres leches cake, just because. Like the afternoon when an older couple of women, visiting the city, saw them holding hands in the market and smiled with complicity and respect. Like the night when, after a fierce argument, they stayed awake until dawn talking and ended up laughing at how ridiculous they'd been. And there was a surprise. One neither of them expected. One afternoon in March, 6 months after signing the inheritance papers, the doorbell rang. Grace opened it and froze. It was Linda, her mother, standing on the threshold with an uncomfortable expression, holding a bag of sweet bread. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice tense. Grace didn't know what to say. She looked back. Alex nodded from the sofa. "Yes, you can come in." Linda entered with slow steps, looking around. The house looked different, brighter, more alive. "It looks good," Linda admitted. "You did a good job." "Thanks." They sat in the parlor. The silence was dense, uncomfortable. Linda set the bread bag on the table. "I didn't come to ask you to forgive me," she finally said. "I came because I've been thinking a lot. About your grandmother. About me. About you." Grace waited without saying anything. "I read all the letters," Linda continued. "The ones my mother wrote to Margaret, the ones Margaret wrote to her, and I realized something." She paused, tears in her eyes. "I realized my whole life I've been afraid of being like her, of feeling what she felt. So I became rigid, critical, cold. I thought if I controlled you, if I kept you on the right path, you could avoid her pain. But you only caused more pain," Grace said quietly. "I know." Linda wiped her tears roughly. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to hide. I'm sorry for making you believe the love you feel is something wrong. Grace felt her own throat tighten. Why now, Mom? Why are you coming to tell me this now? Because my mother died with regrets, Linda replied. She died wishing she'd had the courage to live her truth. And I don't want to die like that. I don't want to die knowing I rejected my daughter out of fear. She looked at Alex, who had remained silent. Alex, I'm sorry for treating you badly. I'm sorry for judging you. You make my daughter happy. And that should be enough. Alex nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Linda. Linda stood up. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I know I have to earn your trust back. But I want to try. If you'll let me. Grace stood up too. She looked at her mother, this cold, critical woman who had never known how to show love, but who was here, trying. Okay, Grace said. We can try. Linda nodded, more tears rolling down her cheeks. She approached Grace and for the first time in years, hugged her. It wasn't a perfect hug. It was clumsy, uncomfortable. But it was real. When Linda left, Grace collapsed on the sofa next to Alex. I can't believe that happened. Me neither, Alex replied, taking her hand. But I'm glad. You deserve to have your mother back. What about you? Have you heard anything from yours? Alex shook her head. No, and I don't know if I ever will. But it's okay. I have Martha. I have your mom, apparently. And I have you. It's more than enough. Life went on. Summer came, bringing heat and tourists. The house was always full. Grace and Alex became part of the Charleston community. Neighbors greeted them. Market vendors saved the best products for them. Neighborhood kids played in their garden. Not everyone accepted them. There were disapproving looks, whispered comments. But there were more smiles than judgments, more support than rejection. One August night, they were sitting in the garden, drinking cheap wine and looking at the stars. Do you know what day it is today? Alex asked suddenly. No. What day is it? Exactly 1 year. 1 year since your grandmother died. Grace thought about it. 1 year, 12 months, 365 days. It felt like a lifetime. Do you think she'd be proud? Grace asked. I know she'd be proud. They stayed in silence, watching the fountain that now worked. Water fell gently, creating a relaxing sound that filled the garden. Do you regret it? Alex asked, repeating the question she'd asked so many times. No, Grace replied without hesitation. Not a single second. Me neither. Grace turned to her. You know what my grandmother told me once when I was a kid? She said true courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and choosing to act anyway. She smiled. I think I finally understand what she meant. Alex leaned in and kissed her. It was a soft kiss, full of promise and peace. When they pulled apart, Grace looked at the house. The lights were on. From outside, it looked warm, welcoming. A home. We built something beautiful, Grace said. We did, Alex agreed, and we're just getting started. 2 years later, on a sunny spring afternoon, Grace and Alex organized a small ceremony in the garden. It wasn't a legal wedding. The South had progressed, but not enough. But it was a celebration of their love, of their commitment. Martha was there, crying with happiness. Linda, too, with a proud smile Grace never thought she'd see. Some friends they'd made in Charleston, some guests who had become family. There was no extended family, no Alex's parents, no uncles or cousins. But there was love. There was acceptance. There was future. When they exchanged simple silver rings, under the wisteria that now covered the entire garden, Grace knew they'd made the right decision. They had lost much, but they had gained more. They had gained the freedom to be themselves. They had gained a house that was more than walls and roof. They had gained the chance to live without hiding. And that night, when everyone left and they were alone in the garden, under the stars, Alex said, "You know what's the most ironic thing about all this?" "What?" "That your grandmother left us this house so we wouldn't make her mistakes. But actually, she gave us something more important." "What did she give us?" "She gave us permission. Permission to love each other. Permission to be happy. Permission to exist without apologies." Grace felt tears burning her eyes. "You're right. And I'm going to honor that gift every day of my life." They embraced under the starry sky, in the garden that had witnessed so much pain and was now witness to so much happiness. And somewhere, Grace knew her grandmother and Margaret were together, smiling. Because in the end, love always finds a way. Always. 5 years later, the Charleston house had become more than a home. It had become a refuge. Grace and Alex opened the doors to young women who were going through the same thing they had gone through. Women who had been rejected by their families. Women who had nowhere to go. The house always had an available room. There was always an extra plate of food. There was always someone willing to listen. Martha kept coming, now over 70, but still strong, still wise. Linda came every Sunday for lunch. The relationship with Grace wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. Alex never spoke to her mother again, but she found a new family in the women who passed through her house, in the stories they shared, in the tears they dried together. Grace kept working at the community clinic. Alex had started giving carpentry workshops for women. They lived with little money, but with great purpose. And every night, without fail, they sat in the garden, under the wisteria, next to the fountain that now flowed freely, and they talked about everything and nothing, about the dreams they had, about the fears they still carried, about gratitude for having had the courage to choose each other. "Did you ever wonder how it would have been," Alex asked one night, "if you had stayed 10 years ago, if you'd never left?" Grace thought about it. "We probably would have suffered more. We probably wouldn't have been ready. And now? Now we're exactly where we're supposed to be." Grace looked at her with eyes full of love. "It took 10 years. It took pain, loss, sacrifice. But it was worth it. Every second was worth it." Alex smiled. That smile Grace loved. That smile that made everything make sense. "I love you," Alex said. "I love you too." And in that moment, in that garden full of memory and hope, under a sky that had seen generations of hidden love, Grace knew something with absolute certainty. They had broken the cycle. They had chosen love over fear. They had honored the women who came before and couldn't do it. And they had built something that would last, not just a house, but a legacy. A legacy of courage, of truth, of unapologetic love. And that legacy would live long after they were gone. Because true love never dies. It only transforms. It multiplies. It becomes something bigger than the two people who felt it first. It becomes hope. And hope in the end is all we really need to keep going. If you want the continuation of this story, write it in the comments, because that's the only way I'll know what you want. And don't forget that YouTube only prioritizes subscribers. So subscribe now, so you don't miss the next story that will make you believe in love and second chances. This is only the beginning. See you soon.